Hello and welcome to Disney Movie Investigations. This is case file number 2081, which is Disney's Amy, and followed by a bonus story of Epcot's Communicore. So for those of you that this is their first time watching these videos, what we do every week is we take a deep dive into a Disney movie on Disney+, and then from time to time we will add a bonus story just to flush out our knowledge of the Walt Disney universe. So this week, like I said, is the movie Amy, which was released on March 20th, 1981. And it was directed by Vincent McEvely, and it was written by Noreen Stone. And so what this movie is about is in 1913, Amy Medford leaves her possessive, wealthy husband after the death of their son. And she begins a new life teaching blind and deaf children in the Appalachian Mountains at a school for the blind and deaf children. And like I said, this movie takes place in 1913, so there wasn't as much known about helping children that are blind and deaf at this point. And other staff members show resistance to Amy's technique of trying to teach the deaf to speak. And they show resistance, but Amy eventually wins them over, and she becomes close with the staff and the children while building a new life for herself. And all this time, her husband has actually hired a private detective to look for her in order to drag her back to her old life. But she builds strength for herself that she will need to stand up to her domineering husband, who is not content on letting her live her own life anymore. So in terms of the cast, we have Jenny Agutter as Amy Medford, and Barry Newman as Dr. Ben Cochran, and Chris Robinson as Elliot Medford, and Kathleen Noble as Helen Gibbs. And then the children that were at the school for the deaf and blind were actually portrayed by real-life deaf and blind children at the California School for the Deaf. So I thought that was an interesting trivia. So in terms of this film, in 1982, just a year after it was released, Disney Educational Services actually took a snippet from this film and recut it into a Disney educational film, which they had titled Amy on the Lips. And it was just basically teaching about how deaf children could be taught how to speak. Disney did release a DVD on-demand version of this, of the film as part of the Disney Generations collection, and this was released on June 6, 2011. It was a release as well on home video on a limited release as well. So in terms of this movie, I think it's a great emotional film that goes really tugs at the heartstrings in terms of working with the children, and then you get to see the emotional journey that she takes on, because initially the children are not getting at all what she's trying to teach, but you see kind of how they're able to progress it in their mind, and the emotional end of the film, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's just a tearjerker. And it's a great film showing the blind and deaf students, because a lot of the time when they're played by non-deaf children, it's not believable. But this was actually really good, really well quality. And then just a great women empowerment film. It shows Amy Medford being her own woman and not needing a guy to fulfill her life, and just shows that she was able to go out and make it out on her own. So yeah, there's not a lot to this movie. I definitely recommend it. It's a great movie. It's a hidden gem, I think, and not a lot of people have heard of, especially it was in the 80s when Disney was kind of reinventing themselves. This was like 3 or 4 years before Michael Eisner would take over and kind of reinvent Disney. So it was kind of Disney's low point. But I think this is one of Disney's kind of hidden treasures that's on Disney+. So yeah. So in terms of our Disney bonus story, we are going to talk about Communicore. And Communicore was an opening day pavilion in Epcot, and it was dedicated to technological advances. So you got to remember that Epcot opened in 1981. So a lot of the technical advances today are not technical anymore. So a lot of these pavilions and attractions are going to seem like kind of like, what's the big deal? But they were actually quite revolutionary at the time. And Epcot was all about the advances of technology. And this was also located in Future World, so it was kind of like showcasing the future of where we were going. So it occupied 2 semicircular buildings behind Spaceship Earth. And the two buildings were known as Communicore East and Communicore West, and both housed rotating exhibits. So this was actually the hub of Epcot and brought nearly all the ideas of and concepts of that were explored in Future World together into one big building. And the main focus was educating the public on the revolutionary new technology of computers. So I'm just going to go over some of the attractions that were in the pavilion. So first, in Communicore East, we had the Epcot Computer Central. This was an area that was sponsored by Sperry and Unisystem. And the first kind of attraction in it was the Astuter Computer Review, which was a backstage show featuring a shrunken down British man dancing and teaching the guests about computers. It featured a song, the Computer Song, which was written by Disney legends, the Sherman Brothers. And I'll include a clip in the video of what the song sounded like.
You see my friends, the computer makes life easier. Saves me time and headaches too. He sorts things out, analyzes anything. My enormous problem, to him's a piece of cake. He's got a great big memory like an elephant. Utilizes knowledge without end. That's why I'm a router for the computer. Everybody needs a friend.
The next show was Backstage Magic, which replaced the Astuter Computer Review, and it featured a computer operator known as Julie, and she had a graphics sidekick named I/O, or input/output. And the show demonstrated the process of operating audio animatronics and used kind of showed guests what it took to operate some of the audio animatronics that they found throughout the Disney parks. Next one is the Smart One, which was a small interactive robot who was playing guessing games with guests, and he was voice activated. Another following kind of, we're going kind of around in a circle in Communicore West or East, sorry, but the Great American Census Quiz, which was featured an up to the date by minute U.S. population counter. And guests could take multiple choice quizzes based on national demographic data. So they took some of the quizzes include the 50 states, the population clock, school days, communication line, on the farm, and home sweet home. Next, the attraction is Manufactory, which guests would put together different parts of different American flags on computers. And when done correctly, fun graphics such as Mickey Mouse would come onto the screen and congratulate them on a job well done. The next attraction was the Get Set Jet game, which guests would use their fingers to slide and load luggage and passengers onto airplanes. So keeping in mind with all these attractions, this is 1981 when this is going on. So although it seems like what's the big deal right now, this was kind of revolutionary at the time. And then finally, the last attraction is the Compute a Coaster, which was a build your own roller coaster game. And it was hosted by a beaver wearing a hard hat. And guests would assemble their 3D coaster, and when they were done, they could get a rider's view of their own ride. So the next area is called the Travel Port, which was sponsored by American Express. And guests could see a slideshow of various vacation destinations with touchscreens. And then located right next to these slideshow presentations would be an American Express travel service office and an agent that could book your next destination right there on the spot. So the next area is called the Electronics Forum, and this the first attraction there was a News Choice Theater, which featured a round foyer area featuring 3 hanging TV banks. So 2 of the TVs would feature sports, businesses, and weather stations, and the 3rd TV featured Disney and Disney Park news, and each of the TVs got its signal from a large satellite dish that was actually located on the building outside. And then behind the hanging TVs was a poll asking for the most important person of the 20th century. And Disney was actually conducting this poll, and they were going to actually announce the winner on Disney TV. Unfortunately, plans changed because they were taken down as several cast members were caught kind of rigging the vote. because there was a write-in vote option, and so the cast members got all together and were kind of like writing in one of their friends' names and like kind of stacking the vote. So when Disney got a hold of this, they took them down and they abandoned the plans for this. Next to the News Choice Theater was the Future Choice Theater, and a host or hostess would present worldwide topics such as energy, population, and then answer consoles were built into the armrests so guests could actually voice their opinion on these topics. And then we have the Energy Exchange, which was sponsored by Exxon. And this showed just different models and different techniques of how we get energy. So the first one was an offshore drilling, which was a giant model of a deep sea drilling platform. Then we had the blowout preventer, which was an oil well blowout preventer, and it showed guests how to prevent wasteful gushes and how to kind of conserve our oil. Then we had oil shale, which was on display, a huge 30,000 pound chunk of oil shale, which next to the shale was a giant bucket from a power shovel and other drilling equipment. And kind of it was just showing kind of the different forms of oil that it can take that we kind of use as energy. Next to that was a coal locator, which had a series of rings which was lit with a different color, and it would show which countries had the most coal. And then we had energy facility models, which were scale models of energy facilities. And then next to that, we had the video bicycle, which was a bicycle pedaling machine, allowing guests how much energy it would take to make a gallon of gas. Then we had the driving machine, which was a graphic demo showcasing guests how many miles per gallon in a car varies depending on a number of factors, including weather, tire traction, stuff like that. Then we had the 100-watt tubes, which allowed guests to turn a crank to allow a bulb to glow brightly. And next to it was the photovoltaic cells, and these cells would stop moving if guests were able to put their hands between the cells and the light source. So it was like just kind of a way to show alternating current. And then finally we had the energy information terminals, which had touchscreens which allowed guests to ask questions and retrieve answers based on short video presentations about energy. So in terms of the restaurants in Communicore East, we had the Stargate restaurant, which served breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this was what eventually would become what is now currently Electric Umbrella. And then we had the beverage base, which sold snack items, different beverages, stuff like that. In terms of merchandise shops, we had the Centaurium, which was Epcot's largest merchandise shop with 2 different levels. Level 1 sold Epcot and Disney merchandise, while Level 2 was accessed by a glass elevator and sold electronics, Team Mickey sports merchandise, and Art of Disney items, so different paintings and different portraits and stuff like that. So that's Communicore East, and then we go to Communicore West. So the first area is Futurecom, which was sponsored by Bell and then eventually AT&T. So inside this, we had the information fountain, which displayed several different types of communication media. Next to it, we had the Age of Information, which was a large animated mural with wooden figures, and different computer games surrounded the mural that guests could play, different kind of primitive computer games to these days. And then we had the Amazing Microchip, which was a large microchip maze for younger guests. Next to it, we had the Intelligent Network, which was a 20 by 30 foot fiber optic map of the United States displaying long distance telephone routes. So that's when people this was before cell phones, remember, so it was displaying kind of the different long distance telephone routes. Then we had the teleconferencing, which was a series of monitors just demonstrating teleconferencing, and guests would be filmed by a hidden cast member who then would banter with different guests. So this is kind of what a precursor to what Turtle Talk or Crush would become. Then we had Face-to-Face, which was an interactive color picture phone screen. And then the next area was the Expo Robotics. So we had a show featuring industrial robot arms performing different stunts, like placing a toy top spinning on a sword. The robotic arm was actually named Pixel, and the robotic arms would do this to the sound of circus music. Next to this, we had portrait robots, which a robot would draw your portrait for you. And then finally, we had the t-shirt robots, robots would airbrush Disney characters on t-shirts that you could then purchase. In terms of services, we had the Epcot Outreach, which displayed future and upcoming Epcot pavilions and exhibits. So it was kind of like a preview center. And then we also had the Teacher Center, which would sell study guides and Epcot educational material for teachers that they could take home and use in their classrooms. And then this Communicore West also had a restaurant called the Sunrise Terrace Restaurants, and they sold fried chicken, seafood, and salads. So that's basically Communicore. I kind of went through it quickly, but I didn't want this video to be too long. But yeah, it's basically what it was, a huge pavilion type kind of trade show type feel, but it definitely had a lot of things for the guests to do. So it's closure. In order to keep Epcot updated and vital, it actually closed and became Innoventions, and it stayed in Innoventions until actually just last year. And this allowed it to be more corporate driven, because there's always the joke that Disney's loves to do different attractions if they can get somebody else to pay for it. So Innoventions was a way for different corporations to include the different exhibits, and then they would showcase their own technology. So yeah, that's basically Communicore. It's I never experienced it personally, but I've definitely seen pictures of it, and talking to different kind of older guests, they have a great love for it, and I just thought it was really cool, something that was kind of unique attraction for something for everybody to do. So definitely one of those everybody loves it attractions. So in terms of this week's artifact, I thought I would share the lovely Communicore logo. So this is what the Communicore logo would look like, and it had the the crescent-shaped buildings, both east and west. So that'll do it for this week's case file. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please stay tuned to our next case file, which is our October bonus poll, just in time for Halloween. It is the original 1984 Ghostbusters. So I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will catch you on the next video.